Armour Golden Star ham. When buying a canned ham, remember the honest ham. Not to be confused with your humble servant. No, Armour really has a terrific ham going for them. It's the truth. Say, sometimes we get a lot of wires. We've been getting a lot of them lately, and sometimes you just have to read one at least, because I especially appreciate this one. It's from the Lindens in Peoria, Illinois, and it says, Western Union just delivered it today, Dick Cavett, congratulations on the minest moments of the mediahas noun rigaho on. I appreciate that. I think I know what you meant. My first guest is a beautiful, fascinating movie star. Following Armour Ham, the beauteous Jane Fonda. And a lovely thing you are, too.
Oh, thank you, Dick.
Do you remember me?
Yes, I do. Of course I remember you.
Do you really?
Yeah.
How about that? Where do you remember me from?
The last time I was on the show.
You were on the show once before.
Yes, I was.
Yes, no, I know that very well. But do you remember the first time we ever met? This is a terrible thing to say.
No.
What's the first time you ever remember meeting me?
On your show.
Really?
Yes.
I'm crushed. That was the 5th time we had met.
Really?
Do you believe that? No, you, when I was in college, you used to go with a guy who lived in the same college I did. And you were eating in the dining hall one day. And I said hello, and you said hello. Then the second time was about a year and a half later, and I saw you in New York, and I said, I once said hello to you in the dining hall at Yale. And you said, oh, did you? And the third time was about a year later. And I said, I recalled the other 2 things. And you said, buzz off, Mac, I think.
No.
You don't remember that?
No.
No, well, maybe none of that's true then, but part of it is anyway. So
don't take it personally, though.
I won't.
No.
If you forget me now during this conversation...
Then you can take it personally.
If you suddenly turn and say, where did you come from? How long have you been sitting there? I'll be hurt. There are more sides to you lately than ever. I thought we had seen them all in Barbarella, but by this I mean you're really a serious actress now, much more so than even before. I mean, a lot of people said you were greatly talented, not just beautiful. But now, since they shoot horses, don't they? They really are convinced. Do they act different toward you now? Does anyone treat you more seriously? Or? You forgot me, right?
Yes, I guess they do. People treat me more seriously because of that, because of things that I'm talking about, because of things that I'm doing. Yeah. It's a very good feeling, as a matter of fact.
How concerned are you about the fact that you may get an Oscar?
It would be very nice.
Yeah. Do you dream about it? Does it mean a lot?
No, I've got lots of other more important things to dream about.
Such as?
Oh, wow. Well, the kind of things that I'm discovering, the kind of things that I've been listening to and hearing, and
Can you speak up just a bit for the balcony?
Yeah, you can't hear me up there? I've been having lots of dreams about the kind of things that I've been seeing and hearing and finding out about, and some of it's very disturbing, and I guess those are more important things to dream about than Oscars. It would be very nice if I got an Oscar, though. But who knows?
You were in the papers not too long ago with something that had happened involving an army base and some Indians. Or am I confusing 2 items at once?
Well, the media confused a lot of things.
Well, it was very confusing. I saw a short item about it, and I never saw anything else about it.
It was one of the things that proved to me, of course I already knew it, that you never can believe what you read in the newspaper. I discovered that I had led troops of Indians onto several army bases and was in stockades with them. And what actually happened was I went to the state of Washington to visit a GI coffee house and to talk to some Indians up there about the fact that their fishing rights have been taken away and they're dying. They're starving to death because of it. While I was up there, I found out that the Indians were planning to occupy an army base in protest against the fact that their demands for the right to the land. All non-used federal land goes to the Indians by treaty. And when they have tried to ask the officials to let them use the land to build a cultural center and a university, nobody's been listening to them. So they thought, well, people will listen to us maybe if we occupy the base. And I thought, well, if I'm there, perhaps by virtue of my presence, there will be less brutality. Yeah. So I went on the base with a couple of Indians and a friend of mine, Mark Lane, and didn't see any Indians anyplace except the two that were with me. I didn't know what had happened. I thought maybe there'd been a mix-up. But the Army knew what I was there for, and they asked me to leave, telling me that the base was closed to civilians, which wasn't true because there were civilians coming off and on the base all the time. And
did they know who you were when they?
Yeah, sure, they knew who I was, and they knew that I was involved with the Indians up there. And they asked me to leave, and I said I wouldn't go because there was no reason for me to go, and they dragged me off. And I discovered later that we'd served as a diversionary tactic without meaning to. The Indians had, during that time, occupied the base at another point. You know, you laugh, but it's really a very serious thing. People are not listening to the Indians. They're not trying to help. There's no way that the Indians can make themselves heard. So they're occupying these pieces of land, which are theirs by right of treaty. Well, that was the thing that happened in the morning. In the afternoon, I went on to another Army base with a group of GIs to talk to the soldiers, just to find out, you know, what they thought, the ones that had been in Vietnam, the ones that were going over, and to invite them to the coffee house that night. And I was arrested and taken to a provost marshal's office and detained there for over 3 hours and given expulsion papers saying that I had broken a law. And when I asked the colonel what law I had broken, he said, I don't know. However, I was given my paper and I left.
Yeah, I saw you had been arrested.
You know, it made me think about a lot of things. The fact that those of us who do speak up about things we believe in, about the war in Vietnam, about the fact that a lot of people's rights are being taken away from them, that people don't have a way to speak up and defend themselves, that when one tries to say these things, to voice a protest, you get shut up, you get put in jail, or you get arrested, or you get thrown off Army bases. There are lots of people in my business who are, you know, coming on the base and making a lot of people laugh and urging people to go overseas. They can stay on the bases and get a lot of people all worked up, and if I come on, I'm thrown off. I find that this is discriminatory, it's isolating the GIs, and I want to do something about it. I don't think it's fair.
When did specifically the Indian subject impress itself on you so much that you wanted to do something about it?
Well, I guess it, you know, I've tried to think back over how it happened, that little by little I became concerned to the point where I wanted to take a direct political and emotional stand in certain issues. It started, I guess, about 4 years ago. I was living in France, and stories started coming in, as they do, easier in France than they do in America, about what's been going on in Vietnam. And, you know, I found it very difficult to believe, and I said to my French friends, I said, if the American Army and if the Marines and our government are doing these things, they must be okay. I mean, we're Americans, so they must be okay. Then I started finding out more things. I started seeing film. I started hearing GIs talk. And I began to realize that maybe they weren't okay, and that maybe as Americans we are just as capable of atrocities, of mistakes, as all the other people in the world. We're no better, but we're no worse. And it's important for people to realize that just because the system says something is right, that it's right, maybe it's wrong. Well, once you face that, you have to start re-examining a lot of things. Your own personal position vis-a-vis the system. Are we free, each one of us? I began to realize that I wasn't free. As a woman, I wasn't free. I was discriminated against. Even as an actress, as someone who wants to talk, I was discriminated against. Then I went to India. And I made a point of going to the very poorest parts of India, in Calcutta, for example, where the poverty is so extraordinary. It made me admire human beings, that we can survive those kind of circumstances. Well, I would come back to my first-class hotel and look out the window, and there I would see middle-class Indians playing golf and mink coats and all this, and I thought, wow, you know, these people are just not seeing what's happening. And I started getting upset, and then I thought, well, it's happening in my own country. I mean, my own Indians, the American Indians, are being wiped out. I'll go back and do something, and you've got an ad coming up, right?
How can you tell? from
Yeah,
the
I can
way
tell
my
your eyes are glassing
moving
over.
around? Yes. Yes, it's that. What is that? You're applauding for glassy eyes? I don't understand that. You brought an Indian friend with you.
Yes, I did.
Or one, at least that
Yes,
we're
I
going to
did.
meet after this.
Yes, yes. A girl, an Indian called Laneda Means, who is of the Bannock tribe. It was once a great Indian tribe. There are now perhaps 3 or 4 families left in Idaho on the Fort Hall Reservation. And she was one of the original 14 members to occupy Alcatraz. And I thought it would be interesting for her to come here and perhaps talk about some of the things she's been through.
All right. Her name is?
Laneda Means.
Laneda?
Yes.
Could you make one thing clear to me about the Indians' claim to the land that they're on? Jane said something earlier, and it was not exactly clear to me about the treaties that we have with Indians.
Yes, there are treaties. In specific, the reason why we took Alcatraz, I could mention the Sioux Treaty of 1868, but then there's also congressional enactment within the last part of the 1800s that gives us title to the land as well. Not only that, but then the government gave us, our reservations in accordance to our treaties.
There's no question. The reservations, there's no problem with. By this, I mean, I know there are problems on the reservations, but I mean, your right to the land is
No,
not
there's no
questioned.
problem at all. We just want the government to live up to their part.
There's a great deal of problem. They're taking it away from them. That's what they're doing.
I mean, are they trying to take away things that are now reservations? Not like the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota or the Pine Ridge.
Well, legally, we
Those are-
have every right, but we are having problems in them trying to take the land away from us, yes. They've been doing that for quite a number of years, and it's been quite recently that now they're trying to terminate the Indians and take the reservations away,
I didn't realize that.
and putting dams on every reservation and flooding us out as well.
What specifically has happened to you because you're an Indian?
Well, that's a
What was your
it's a
childhood
long
like? Where did you
story,
live in?
actually, but
What kind of house did you live in?
well, I imagine your question is probably looking towards what's it like on the reservation, or what
Yes.
is a reservation about. There are a lot of things that go on, especially when you're completely controlled by a bureaucracy. And like I was telling Jane earlier, when the Secretary of the Interior is like the president to the Indian people, and he appoints the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, who then in turn appoints the superintendent on every reservation, and we haven't had the right to select who we want, so that we can control our own affairs, then it really leads into a lot of hardships, and the people's lives are pretty bad because of this type of a situation, when people can't have anything to say about their own lives or future or even their own destiny.
What can you tell me about the suicide rate among Indians? I think it was the late Senator Kennedy who made that fact known to the country, that the suicide rate was so depressingly high among, maybe it was the Navajo, but I don't know if it's true among Indians in general or not, is it?
Well, Fort Hall, which is the reservation that I'm from, leads suicide over 10 times the national average. And this is, it's just an example of, the type of conditions that we're subject to and the type of treatment that we're subject to as well, because since the civil rights law, they've tried to say a lot of good things, and for all people, but I guess it doesn't apply to us because they've taken down the signs, no dogs or Indians allowed, but the feeling is still there and it still exists among
Where were
the people.
those signs?
They were in the nearby reservation towns, well, off the reservation and in the nearby cities.
No dogs or Indians allowed.
No, so I guess that's why they sent us on relocation, was because they wanted to push termination for the Indian people and assimilate us into the cities. So they established this program called relocation, which we better term as dislocation, and they take us to the cities and proceed on from there.
Assimilation, you would it be fair to say that the Indian in general does not want to be assimilated into society, that what you want is to remain on the reservations, to have better conditions on them, and to
We want to
preserve your culture? Is that too
we want to
pompous
stay
a way of putting it?
alive because as it is right now, you know, with the suicide rates as high as it is and with the type of conditions that we're subject to and the dictatorship that exists, then we just want to stay alive, and we want people to understand us and try to understand what's going on in this country today, because if they took some time to look into the situation that is going on, then I'm sure, you know, they could not sit back and let something like this continue. It's terrible.
How can they look into the situation? What can they read or find out about it?
Well, for one, there's a book called
It's called Our Brother's Keeper by Edgar Kahn. It's very good.
Our Brother's Keeper, and then you could look into the Senate subcommittee reports on Indian education.
What about Custer Died for Your Sins? Do you know that book? By Mr. Vine Delury, I think.
I've read them both. I find, you know, if for just a person who wants to find out as clearly and easily as possible, a book called Our Brother's Keeper, as Lynetta said, is the best thing. I just, one of the ways that any citizen can find out the best is certainly not reading the newspapers or watching television. It's to go to the source. You know, as I went to Alcatraz, well, everybody can't go to Alcatraz, but people who live near reservations, or if they live near the relocation centers, to go and to talk to the Indians, they won't believe what they'd find out. And I am sure that when a human being, any American, would find out what is happening to the Indians, they would take action. I'm optimistic, perhaps, but that's what I believe.
Who are your friends in Congress?
Senator Kennedy, McGovern, Mandel, Harris.
And I might add that in the state of California, we're looking pretty good politically as well, because UNRWA just sponsored a bill giving title of the island to the Indians on Alcatraz. And it passed unanimously on the floor, 52-0, so we are looking pretty good politically in the state of California as far as the Alcatraz issue is concerned. As far as other things are concerned, we still have a lot of things to do yet. And a lot of people have to start, you know, looking around and try and find out about, you know, what is going on.
Thank you for coming and telling us that.